Oh, hang on. No, don't remove. Don't press the wrong button. Hang on. Why can't? Oh, there we go. There we go. Perfect. All right. So this is a poll. So Redbridge is fairly accurate, and just because we don't like what they poll doesn't mean it's not true. So I need to make this bigger so I can read it myself. So this has come out, and I'll just read Coz's comment really quickly. The call for a coalition right turn may end up being the longest U-turn away from government. So just so everyone's aware, Cos Samaras is a Labor diehard, but his polling is fairly accurate. I don't necessarily agree with his sentiments, but essentially what he's saying here is that as the coalition starts to lean more right, i.e. abandon net zero, it might take them a generation to get back in government with that sentiment, showing that, you know, Gen Z and the younger voters are leaning far more left than generations above them. So he's saying basically that the age profile of each major party tells a story. The Greens' median age is early 30s. Labor is early 40s. The coalition is mid-50s, and One Nation is early 60s. And that kind of runs with that. I always attribute this to Churchill, but I don't think it was actually Churchill that said, in your youth, you are left. In your maturity, you lean right. I can't remember what the actual quote is.
If you're not a socialist when you are young, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative when you are old, you have no brains.
Is that actually Churchill? I don't think
I don't know whether he ever said it or not, but something approximating what I just said is the quote that is attributed to him, but I've no idea if it's true.
It's probably Plato or Aristotle, you know, or Einstein. One of the few.
I doubt that they were discussing in those terms, but hey, I've been proven wrong before. Jump in the comments.
That's the throwaway sentiment. If you've got a quote, you don't know who it's attributed to. You just attribute it to the big three. It's, it's Aristotle said this, I'm sure. Anyway, I'm getting off track. But so this is kind of, looking at this polling here, it shows that, there is a strong contingent of Gen Z, particularly women Gen Z, who are leaning further and further progressive. And again, this comes down to a couple of things. One, it's the universities and the school system. Education has been infiltrated by Marxists. This is the ideology. This is the wokeness. We know all that. We've talked about this. But also what it is, and I bring this back to that opening clip where I talked about that guy calling me a Jezebel for swearing, right? This is exactly the sentiment. That alienates people who have a culture that is vastly different to the culture that old mate grew up in. Now, I'm just making assumptions, but it does sound like a boomer thing to say. So old mate who made that comment could be in his 60s, 70s. I don't know. That's an assumption. But let's say he is, right? Gen Z have got 40 to 50 years between those two. There's an entirely different culture. There's an entirely different vocabulary, an entirely different way of communicating. And the problem is a lot of these conservatives or the more right-leaning people are naturally older and they don't know how to communicate to Gen Z, who feel completely disenfranchised and also have been brought up on the fact that the climate's about to implode, that they'll never own a house, that capitalism's terrible, right?
Yeah.
So what we have here is I'm not shocked by these polls. This makes total sense. You spend a minute on Instagram or TikTok, this is exactly what it looks like. But what I'm frustrated by is our leaders have people like Jacinta Press, like Moira Deeming, like Alex Antic, who are great, and yet they get pushed to the back or get, even worse, expelled from their own party for standing up for things that people care about. So, for example, I know I'm jumping all over the point, but I'm trying to make a really clear point here about how out of touch these people are. Moira Deeming, we've talked about this substantially, standing up for women's rights. This is a big one. You have a generation of young sportswomen who are trying to get to the Olympics, who are trying to play in the Australian AFL, whatever they call it, AWFL, whatever it is, right? Who are now getting pushed out of those pole positions by men, right? And I'm going to say that. They're men who pretend to be women. And you've got people on the left saying this is a great thing. Imagine if the Liberal Party went, no, we believe that young women have a right to play in the sports against other women, and this is something that we are going to stand up for. But instead, the Liberal Party expelled Moira Deeming, had her on the side for over a year. She took Prosciutto through defamation, won.
And won.
And the Liberal Party backed him out so he didn't go bankrupt.
That's
What
right.
message does that send to, firstly, women, secondly, young women? So this is what frustrates me about the Liberal Party. And to bring it back to the guy who made the comment, I'm a young woman. I'm someone who's conservative leaning. I'm someone who's libertarian. I'm on your side of the freaking fence. But rather than celebrate the fact that you have someone like me who could have gone the opposite direction, who could have gone woke, who could have been progressive, because let's face it, I live in quite a sexist industry, but I'm not. I'm someone who's very rational, very commonsensical. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, we have this massive age gap, and I speak with some profanity. And because of that, you want to admonish me and make me feel bad and make me feel guilty.
Yeah.
This is why we keep losing. This is my frustration.
So there's a couple of things I want to say as a response to Koss here. Not that he's ever going to hear me, but polling can only show you what people will do with the options they have right now. If you had polled, if you went 1 year before the iPhone was released and did polling, the Blackberry would have shat all over everybody, right? The people are only going to choose from the options that they're given in a poll. Now, there's also self-selection bias in polls, and there's all that sort of stuff. We've talked about all that before. But ultimately, based on the current choices, I do not blame young people at all for rejecting the Liberal Party for all the reasons that you've just described and so much more. But there are circuit breakers available to the Liberal Party. Now, number one, yes, a lot of that Greens vote will shift away from the Greens as they get older, as they get their first paycheck, as they pay their first taxes, as those things happen. It's no coincidence, by the way, that young people's support for the Greens has increased as people have remained children for longer. People are children into their late 20s now. They're still at university. They're still essentially dependents on, government handouts and all the rest of it. Now, not everybody. I'm not having a go at every single uni student, but it's no coincidence that as people get older, as people are able to remain immature for longer, they tend to support the Greens for longer. And it's when they get out into the real world that starts to change. But you've also just got this reality that for a lot of these people, these young, rabid Greens, etc., when they have that epiphany, which not all of them will, but some of them will, when they have that epiphany, the world's not about to end from climate change. We're fine. I've been lied to for, the first 15, 20, 25 years of my life. I've lived in fear. I've lived in despair. I've struggled with mental health and depression because you fed me all of this bullshit. The snapback is going to be really, really savage. So if the Liberal Party can actually turn around and say, hey, the Overton window is now open. We can now go to the polls and say, women only in women's sports, no more net zero. Let's get the cost of living under control by dealing with it at the source rather than throwing more government money at it, which only accelerates the problem. If they can actually turn around and actually stand on something that gives even young people a real alternative, you will immediately see a certain percentage. It won't be a majority, but you will immediately see those bars shift towards the coalition because right now they are giving people no reason. There is nothing at all about the Liberal National Party right now that should inspire anyone to want to vote for them. They are trying to be Labor light, and as such, they have no purpose for existing. That can change radically, and Koss and his polls cannot account for what happens when the iPhone gets released, when the new version of the Liberal Party gets released, where they actually find a spine, reject net zero, reject all the woke ideologies, and get back to basics. Koss and his polling cannot account for what happens.
So normally on a podcast like this, when you've got two people, one of them is the brains of the operation and the other one's the eye candy. In this case, I have to be both, which is, oi, excuse me, this one's, Carly, this one's about me. I have to be both.
It's actually about me.
Seriously, I have to be both, which means I need lots of coffee, lots of caffeine. So you can help me to get lots of caffeine by scanning that little QR code there so that I can just carry this podcast on my...
And subscribe because I'm ridiculously good looking.
Seriously, Carly? Can you not? Wow. She's such a center of attention, isn't she? Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Bye.